right, that is looking pretty amazing for Portland, Oregon. I do say, though, for starting these shows off, I think we now need a Marie stream of conscious mic that just talks about the things that you bring up before we go live on this show, including babies and incubators, where you grow your own baby. We're not even going to talk about that today. Hello, everyone. This is Digital Trends Live. This is our daily broadcast here from Digital Trends, where we bring you all the tech headlines, we bring you interviews, we bring you all kinds of stuff broadcasting live on Periscope, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. And we want to hear your comments and your questions throughout the day. Let's take a look at what's on the docket for our show today. Coming up in just a little bit, we're here live in Portland, Oregon, but we're going to be going to our New York studio where Jeremy Kaplan is going to be joined by Katie Linendoll of, let me make sure I get the name right, Batcol Foundation, to talk about using VR and AR and different kinds of technologies in pediatric cancer to help distract from all the horrors that go along with that. A great way to use technology. So we're going to be discussing that with her in just a little bit. We've got, after that, something that I'm very excited to discuss with everyone on here. I posted this on Twitter yesterday with this question. Would you want your personality to be uploaded as a chatbot so that people could talk to you after you die? There is a company actually working on that called Replica AI. We've got Luke Dormel, one of our staff writers here from Digital Trends, who's going to be hopping on to talk about his article and just that concept in general of, is that something you would want? I mean, we get closer and closer every day to living in a Black Mirror episode. This is probably the closest I've seen to that. We're going to be talking about that coming up on the show. And we're going to be joined by Justin Ching of J School. So J School is a production company whose mission is to empower underrepresented communities, people of color, women, LGBTQIA, to tell their own stories and their own voices, especially when it comes to Hollywood and talking about movies and all kinds of different productions like that, to basically expand that and open that up to a lot more people. Very important work. So we're going to have Justin Ching on to discuss that. But to start the day off, I'm Greg Nibbler here out of Portland, Oregon, as I was saying, for Digital Trends Live, and I'm joined today by Marie Pardo-Garber. Hello, Marie.
Hi, Greg.
Thank you for hopping on. Marie is always fascinating, the different things that you look up when we're talking about tech. I never know what's going to be said by Marie. So let's talk about some tech headlines right now. This is how we usually like to kick the show off, whatever the trending story is that we see for the day. And right now, the trending story is this. It kind of relates back to what we were talking about yesterday as well. It is this: Verizon and Samsung are officially going to launch a 5G phone in 2019. Now, it feels like we've already heard this a million times about 5G, but this is the official announcement that they made, which is Samsung and Verizon announcing a 5G smartphone compatible phone on the carrier's network in the first half of 2019.
Yes.
So it's happening.
It's happening. It's on the books. It's scheduled. How well it's going to do is the big question.
That is absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you know, and as we discussed yesterday, and we've got this video on demand that you can take a look with Jeremy and Julian Trucatu talking about 5G in general, especially with Qualcomm's announcements coming up this week. You know, the tech is being built. We are going to get it at some point. How widespread this is going to be, that's one of the big questions. And Verizon right now, they've got it in a few different cities. Technically, there is 5G. I think it was Houston, Sacramento, of all places, Indianapolis, LA. And so when they do have this 5G phone that is officially put out, I guess technically you would be able to use that network service there in those specific cities. By the time we get a full nationwide rollout of 5G, we're thinking that we're a little ways off on that.
Yes, and the fact that Apple is waiting until 2020 is very telling.
That does say quite a bit. Yeah, Apple announcing that or not announcing, but it's most likely they're not even going to put one out next year, which, to be honest, it's a great marketing ploy, I think. You know, and I think that technology is going to be really cool when we do get 5G, but I'm kind of in agreement with Jeremy and Julian. It's going to be a little while until we get this.
Yes. And, you know, like getting a phone and having the functionality for the future is always good, because I feel like this day and age, by the time you get a new phone, the technology is already outdated. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, this will at least have that in there, you know, have that capability. But we will see. That's one of the trending stories, and we've got a whole article about that at digitaltrends.com that you can take a look at, just relating to the Samsung and Verizon announcement that, yes, indeed, they'll be having that phone come out. One other thing with that, just a couple of bonuses when it comes to the Galaxy S10. So it's the Galaxy S10 is what we're estimating is going to be the 5G, what the rumors are. And that is also rumored to have 6 total cameras, 4 on the back, 2 in the front, 6 cameras, and a 6.7-inch display. Part of the other rumors when it comes to the Galaxy
That's
S10.
insane.
6 cameras is a lot of cameras. How many pictures do you need to take?
6 at a time?
6 at a time. There it is. That was the right answer. So good, Marie. You win. Knock that one out of the park. All right. Let's go to our Read 'em and Weep segment. This is where we take a look at the comments and the questions. And I do see a lot of comments coming in here as we're taking a look at the chat. So go ahead and drop those in. We will address those as they come through, but we do read them after the fact as well on all of our videos here when we're looking at everything that we post. So let's take a look at some of our first comments. No, I do not read these ahead of time on purpose. This is Chris McIntosh, Team Wembassy. Not sure what that is. Soon you can immortalize yourself as an AI chatbot. This is what we're actually going to be talking about on today's show. So Replica AI is not all that impressive, and most folks could build a similar bot on a local machine. This is digitally the same as a pet rock. I spent a little bit of time talking to my digital future Greg bot, chatbot today. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that big right now, but I feel like maybe there's more to it.
Yes, and I think the value of it is per person too.
Right.
If you have somebody that has passed on or that you're not in contact anymore and you have a bot that you can talk to, the value is so much more than just a pet rock.
Right.
If I was to talk to some random person, it could be like a pet rock.
Maybe that has to do more with the personality of Chris.
Yeah.
When we're talking about this. What would you call your new chatbot?
Oh.
I just went with Greg bot. It was really boring.
Hot Mess
I was
Marie.
hoping that Hot Mess Marie. All right, Hot Mess Marie bot, right there that you could talk to. Well, Chris, it is though a really fascinating topic, and we've been getting a lot of response to this. Just the idea of it, even if Replica AI isn't the one, where we go from there, and what's going to happen with that, and is this something that people are going to be interested just even as a concept? So we'll be talking about that. Let's move on to our other one here. Let's take a look. Robert S. Monty, regarding Curiosity, has found an intriguing shiny object on the surface of Mars. It's a Coke bottle in an African desert. Gods must be crazy. Got the reference.
Great.
Nice. Yes. And so, that's talking about an article that's up at Digital Trends as well about Curiosity finding a very shiny object that was on Mars. There's speculation that it could be a meteorite or something along those lines. It's probably what it is, or or it's a gold mine.
I mean,
it's one or the other.
Who knows?
Yes, or it's a Coke
I'm excited
bottle.
to see.
I'm excited to see it's a Coke bottle. All right. All right, taking a look at the comments coming through. We definitely do have some good comments. I'll make sure that we address those as we talk through the show here. All right, Christopher Ruiz. Regarding Digital Trends, breakthrough male contraceptive gel is nearly ready for the bedroom. Gentlemen, do not believe a word of this nonsense. This gel will ruin you permanently. Do not mess with testicular function ever. All right, so that's the comments that we're getting through right there.
Can I just say the
Yes,
amount
Marie,
of
please respond to
trial
this.
and error that has gone into female contraceptives over the years? A gel that you put on the outside of your body sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good. I think that's Tom Likas, who is Christopher Ruiz on there. That sounds like a comment that would come from there. So anyway, Christopher, sorry, buddy. I think that the idea is pretty good, actually. So I wonder how many comments, though, Christopher has about flat Earth and chemtrails. That's where I'm going with that one. So sorry, bud. All right, moving on. Let's talk to the next one. Daniel Rasmussen, regarding the Tesla Model 3 currently costs $38,000 to produce and sells for $35,000. Royalties from their charging stations / maintenance fees over the life of the vehicle, selling a base product for a loss to then profit off of subscriptions and services is nothing new. That's an interesting concept. I haven't read that article at Digital Trends yet. I do want to check that out. Isn't that kind of how Amazon has operated for quite a while too?
Yes, I
with some of their products anyway, at least they did, where they operated at a loss, but then, they get you by just giving you a comeback or...
Yeah, and I mean, Daniel is right. The production cost of building a Tesla is
not as large as what they're talking about on this.
I need to go read the article.
Okay, all right. So
before I say anything else.
No, now you have to get you on record for when we do this.
I know. It's going to get you. I'm going to be on the next Read and Weep.
Yeah. Daniel, very interesting. Yep, I do want to check this out. So again, that's the great thing about Digital Trends. We have articles on anything to do with tech. And so even we here can't keep up on everything that goes up on the site. So now you've got something else that I'm going to be falling down that rabbit hole after this show. So Daniel, thank you for your comment there on Facebook. Nagvira, I'm going to go with that. The problem with Android Auto. Another big topic here at Digital Trends, especially Jeremy Kaplan, our editor-in-chief, who's going to be hopping on the show here in just a little bit from our New York studio with Katie Linendoll. He did an entire piece on his Hear Me Out segment about Android Auto and about where the future of ads are going to be when it comes to different products in our cars. And Nagver says, so you're spending $50,000 to $60,000 for a new car, and now you get ads for the privilege. And that is something, you know, I think we're going to see more and more of.
Ad space.
Ad space.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to autonomous vehicles. You know, if you stop driving, there's going to be you're going to have a lot more of time to pay attention to other things in the car. Advertisements could be one of those things that come in through that. Marie, what do you think about this, about advertisements in vehicles? Are you okay with it?
I mean, I'm not. But if there was a feature, you know, pay a flat rate once.
Right.
And go ad-free. Or just have the option not to use the service and not get the ads. It's kind of like Spotify, listening to Spotify in the car.
Yeah.
If you don't have premium, you get the ads.
Right.
If there's an option for me to turn it off and still use the service that I want, great. If there's not, then I have a little bit of an issue.
Then that's where the issue. I'm taking a look here just at the live comments coming through, because Nagvara brings up a really good point. Tony says, enjoy your movie on autopilot or your food, enjoy your nap on autopilot. Yeah, I like all those ideas for autopilot. Now, the way I would be okay with some of these advertisements, and this is a little bit different than I think what other people were talking about, is if I'm getting everything for free, if I get the service for free, you know, sure.
Yeah.
I'll watch an advertisement. You know, you can throw them on there for me. But I'm also very cheap, so that's where the issue comes down. So taking a look here, just a couple of other comments that are coming through right now about this. Keelan says, or ad companies need to chip in on my car note if they want to do this crap. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm looking at. Like if I'm getting something discounted or I'm getting anything for free off of it, I'll probably take a look at some ads. And that's what I do want to see what other people are saying about this. But that's a good point. You know, because I don't know if I want to pay $50,000 to $60,000 for a new car and still have to watch the ads.
Yes, I want the option to not get targeted by ads.
Yeah, but would you pay another than $5,000 to not have ads, or whatever it would end up being? How much would you pay to not have ads?
I'm pretty cheap too.
Yeah, $500? $500? No ads. No ads. You never have ads in your car. I'll tell you what. I'll go
maybe like
$450.
I'll pay like a $5 to
not
have an ad.
Well, never mind. No deal. You're getting all the advertisements. All right. Well, that's a great comment on that one. So continue on here with Read 'em and Weep. Let's see. Do we have? Okay, we got here. Bala Thimidisetti. Say that one 10 times fast. Okay. Soon you can immortalize yourself as an AI chatbot. Another pesty creep. Bala. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're referring to yourself, because the article is talking about, you know, immortalizing yourself as an AI chatbot. So I'm not sure if you're referring to yourself as another pesty creep. But yes, that certainly creeps will take advantage of the AI chatbots.
That does open up a whole nother avenue of who retains ownership of your chatbot. I suppose the company you uploaded it to.
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, who would have it so that they could just use it forever?
Being pesty creeps.
Yeah, being pesty creeps. You pesty creeps. Now, the internet is full of pesty creeps, so I don't think that's going to be too much of a surprise that will definitely happen.
I'm using that. Pesty creep.
Is that going to be your that'll be your chatbot nickname?
Pesty creep.
Pesty creep. All right, let's get a couple of news stories in here before we move over. And we're going to be heading to New York to talk to Jeremy and Katie about everything that they're doing when it comes to everything that Katie's doing when it comes to this distraction technology. And I want her to explain that term when we head over to New York. But let's talk about a couple other things in the headlines right now. There was another great story from SpaceX. Great, and I just mean that we continue to advance with this. And we're talking about the Falcon 9 launch that just was successful yesterday. It was supposed to happen last weekend. They had to delay it for some tests. Went up yesterday and set 4 new records in the process. So this was spaceflight SSO-A, SmallSat Express mission, which was supposed to take place over the weekend. And some of the different records that it did, it's the same booster has now been launched from all 3 different launch pads by SpaceX, namely the Kennedy Space Center pad, Cape Canaveral Air Force Space Station, Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Launch Complex 40, memorize that one, and Launch Complex 4E at the Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is, a big accomplishment. But also as part of that, I should have said the other part of that record is that it was used for 3 different launches and landings, which is a very, very big important. It's a very important part of this.
It's huge. Being able to reuse those parts.
Yes.
It's a huge milestone.
3 different launches. With that, they also deployed 64 small satellites into orbit, which is a record number of satellites for a U.S. Company, but it's not the world record for most satellites being deployed at one time. That record actually goes to India, where an Indian Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle launched 104 satellites at one time into orbit. I feel like that's a bad record to really try to break. It seems like too many satellites.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but if SpaceX is going to have to figure that out, especially with the advent of their new Star internet system. I think it was called Star. Dang it, Star. What was it? Starlink. Thank you, producer in the back. Thanks, Mike. Starlink internet system, where they're going to be launching. I think it's up to like 12,000 different satellites that are going to be launched.
That's going to be huge.
Yeah, so
we're really going to have to figure out how to maintain.
That's a lot of satellites to try to maintain.
Yes.
Yeah, it absolutely is. All right, a couple more headlines to get to here as we continue on. And before we head on over to New York to talk to Jeremy and Katie, we've got Quora. Another hack, another day, another hack of information. And this one may not be quite as devastating as the Marriott one. We're still waiting to find out what happened with that. But Quora, which I'm sure inevitably we've all ended up on Quora at some point. When you type in a question, you end up there. Usually the answers aren't the greatest, but nonetheless, Quora has revealed that a data breach has affected up to 100 million users of Quora. So they were targeted by hackers. They just found out about this. They said on Monday, December 3rd was when it was discovered that they had unauthorized access to its computer systems. Now, the part that's compromised is they believe that people the hackers got account information such as names, email addresses, and encrypted passwords. But then it also includes non-public content and actions, for example, answer requests, downvotes, and direct messages, so including that stuff as well. I mean, a lot of what Quora has done is, when you're posting on there, it's public information.
Yes.
It's being shown. However, that idea that they've got your names, emails, and encrypted passwords. They don't believe they got the actual passwords. You should be okay, but nonetheless, I think it just reminds us all that we really need to change our passwords a lot.
Yeah, and I read a term earlier today called breach fatigue.
Breach fatigue.
And I think
we're just like, whatever. Yeah, they're got to get everything.
It's another, like you said, another day, another breach. And these are very serious things, but it happens so often that people are just tired of hearing it, or it just
where we're just gonna not
right
even paying
through.
attention to it,
No,
and then they get everything.
I know a lot of people have the same generic login that for a lot of different accounts, or for.
I don't, Marie.
No, I know
being
you
in
don't.
IT here, absolutely not me. I have a different password for everything that I use here at Digital Trends.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I need to.
Without
going to work on.
Without getting too far down my little rabbit hole, the amount of people that reuse passwords, and that now that they have your email address, they have your passwords, they can easily make that jump into other accounts. And then next thing you know, if you have a smart home system with that same email address, maybe the same password,
Why do I feel like I'm going to get a sternly worded letter from IT at Digital Trends after this episode?
I'm already, I can see it forming in my
already
mind.
crafting it right now. Well, change your passwords. Don't use the same password and everything. That's the key thing with there, because you're right. What did you call it?
Breach fatigue.
Breach fatigue. Yeah. I mean, it seems like every other day that we're finding out something else. But this is 100 million users at Quora, so change your passwords. All right, final story that we're going to do here before we head to New York. I wanted to bring this up, and it has to do with Walmart's, and they have announced that they are going to be deploying 360 autonomous cleaning basically janitor robots in US stores in the first part of next year. This is by the end of January, you're going to be seeing these around. And these robots in particular, if you have been to Seattle, the Seattle airport, San Diego airport, Boston and Miami, you've probably already seen them. They're kind of like a motorized wheelchair that scrubs the floors. And they can work around people. They apparently will not run people over.
I was about to ask.
They've got the technology to keep that from happening, and they also have the technology to gather data as they're going around, as they're riding around these stores. They can pick up data on what people are doing. So I think that part is the really interesting side to me. It's from a company called BrainCorp that has partnered with Walmart to deploy these autonomous robots.
BrainCorp just sounds like the villain in some animated movie. It really does.
BrainCorp, yes, it does sound like that. You're absolutely right. Well, 360 autonomous floor scrubbing robots to Walmarts near you. Starting next year. All right, well, Marie, I want to thank you so much for having me here today, too, for our news segment. Coming up on the show, I want to remind everybody of a couple of things that are coming up here. In particular, in about 15 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, we're going to be joined by Luke Dormel to talk about that AI story that we brought up there in the tech headlines of, would you upload your personality to be a chatbot to live on after you pass away? That's a topic we're going to be covering here in a little bit. And we're here in Portland, Oregon. I'm Greg Nibbler. And now it is time to head to our New York studio, where we are going to be joined by Jeremy Kaplan and Katie Linendoll to talk about some really neat things that she is doing with her company, or well, representing her company, Bot Club, to talk about some different ways that they are using distraction technology to help out in a very important aspect for people going through pediatric cancer. So let's head out there right now. Hello, New York.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings from New York City on a balmy and wonderful, no, it's not. It's terrible out. It's cold and yucky. What are you going to do? I'm Jeremy Kaplan, joined today by Katie Linendoll.
Hello.
Whom you might recognize from Fox or MSNBC or ESPN or basically everywhere.
Yeah, it's a blessing. Get to contribute to a number of different outlets.
I got to ask you, were you ever on WKRP in Cincinnati?
WKRP.
Do you remember that show? I'm just making it up.
I do not recall that.
Vintage
so that
show from the 70s.
Yeah?
It was terrible. I'm showing my age here.
No,
Anyway, forget me.
Tell.
Katie's going, what's going on? Why have I been brought here? We brought you here to talk about a topic that I am particularly intrigued by ever since I heard what you were up to. We have a variety of VR headsets here.
We do.
And I have been concerned, as I think a lot of people in the industry are, about what people are actually doing with VR headsets. Mm-hmm. Consumers seem to say, I don't know if I want this. You've got a much more practical, smarter, fantastic use for them.
Yes, and one that we've been working on in kind of in a beta mode, if you will, for the last 2 years. So I've been working in the pediatric space, in pediatric cancer as a volunteer for the last 7 to 8 years, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And when we lost one of our little besties, his name was Cole Winnefeld, the Bat Cole Foundation was started. And what we do, yes, you get to see a little bit of our decor here. What's so awesome about keeping Cole's legacy really alive is our first focus is raising money for clinical trials.
Sure.
Our second focus is in the world of technology, and it's kind of in two different realms. We not only do hospital room makeovers, which are so cool, floor to ceiling, and I have to give a shout out because HP has been a very generous partner in making that happen, theming out these rooms for the kids.
Oh, fantastic.
But yes, you get to see that in terms of VR, what we've been experimenting with and has been so successful is these VR programs, what I like to call distraction technology in hospitals. Mm-hmm. So when kids are coming from hundreds of miles away from their home and they're going through radiation or chemo, that can be days, weeks, months in the hospital.
Sure.
And there's a lot of downtime. Now, what if you bring in virtual reality headsets and they can be used as, again, distraction technology to be on a roller coaster, on a go-kart, watching Netflix? It's amazing the capabilities of VR in a way that you never, which we talked about, thought about VR in the past.
I used to work with a guy who called it smartphones and computers and all of this stuff digital distraction technology.
Yes.
And he meant it in a bad way. But you're saying there's actually a really great upside to that.
Fantastic upside. And what's been so amazing, if I can say, and the best case study I have is a little shout out to Cody St. John, who's one of my main testers. He's been in and out of hospital for the last 10 years. Oh. And he has been so critical in our testing in saying, what's working, what's not? Is the headset too heavy? Is the content there what you need? Or is it great for your downtime in the room where you don't have anything else to do? And the answer there right now is yes. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me in my world of technology, that's my whole career, my whole focus has been in tech, my background in IT, is Are we at the perfect place where we have the perfect software and hardware for it? We do not. But we're working through that. And I see the long-term vision, and it's exciting.
I saw a video where you're talking about potential evolution for headsets like this.
Correct.
Because right now, this is a hunk of plastic that doesn't
It's heavy.
do a lot. It's heavy.
It's still heavy.
Especially
Especially if you're using it for more than 20 to 30 minutes, you're like, for a child, and again, we want to start at that age of 13, which is recommended, but
if you're talking about a clinical setting, however, we have a lot of people wear smartwatches for fitness purposes that track your heart rate potentially.
Correct.
And other things. There's a lot of potential to do other things there. But what if that was just wrapped into this experience? If you're already in a clinical setting, maybe you need to get some information about a patient.
That's all about the data analysis, and I think that's a critical component to our long-term goal is, and God willing, we get there in terms of the technology and the software and hardware, but also in the data gathering, can we show staff from the nurses to the doctors that the metrics of the heart rate, the breathing, we're doing calculations to prove that this content is working? Because it's one thing for a family member or a child to say, hey, this is great, again, distraction technology.
Sure.
It's another thing to have that data and that number crunching to show it's actually working.
Do you have any thoughts about what has been good content for these kids? Is there certain VR things that work well versus others?
There are, and we have to be very careful because I think, one critical component that's missing right now is having the headsets and having a set amount of locked down content, if you will, because when you're pushing this out as a foundation, you have to make sure, we know from VR content, I mean, I've been testing VR since the early days in the infancy, if the frame rate is off, that can create a nauseating experience.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to be very careful. But I have to
somebody
say,
who's taking some drugs that's already making them susceptible to nausea.
absolutely. So you have to be even more cautious. But in terms of what we've experienced so far, what has been the best content, and you probably might guess this, it's Netflix. It is watching movies, it's watching shows, and being in that immersive experience where there's a movie theater right in front of your face.
Makes sense.
It's fun, yeah, and it's longer, bits as opposed to the interactive fun activities are also working great, and there's a select handful that we're like, wow, these are fantastic, but the longer form content, solid.
To your point about the hardware not being there yet, though, the nausea factor is still a big one. I remember the first VR thing that I saw years ago. It was an experience of being on a ship.
Oh, that's the first one I did too.
It was phenomenal. I loved it, and I was instantly like, this can't last.
I've never shared this experience with somebody because that was the first, this was years ago, probably same for
And
you.
it was the same thing.
I was on a Navy ship, and I was like, I'm going to puke. I'm just going to be honest right now. But it was so lifelike. I knew that it was a snapshot of what could be for VR, and that to me, I was like, I see this in physical therapy. I see it with the kids. But yes, and I've done racing games too where the frame rate, I was like, oh my gosh. I've done mazes where I'm like, this isn't going to end well. Yeah. And then you got to get out of the maze too because you feel digitally in like another realm. But yes, I think it's critical to not put on those activities and those experiences. It could be problematic.
Tell me about the room wrapping experience. You said HP is a partner?
Yes, they are. They've been very generous. So we have done select theme rooms. And it sounds like low-level technology when you think about going into a hospital room, which adult or kid, that we have white wall experience. It's very sterile. And the hospital, they're there to do their job. It's not.
But the whiteness of the walls is merely to evoke sterility. It's not actually creating sterility, right?
We want to create fun, and we want kids to go into rooms that are themed out, which has been so cool, and being able to floor to ceiling do these hospital room makeovers. And the waiting list, I can tell you from the hospitals that we're working with, it's touching. The staff get as excited about it as the kids do. And even with Cole, who the Bat Cole Foundation is named after, he got all of his drawings, he was a drawer, are in one particular Cole room.
Oh, that's great.
So it really pays honor to the kids, and it's very moving.
And so you have some large form HP printers, I imagine, that are putting out some of the wall wraps?
And that's my point about the technology. It's to create these really amazing high-end, high-printed wall wraps and wall decals, they have to be done right. And also with hospitals, you have regulations you have to follow. It's not about going in there and sticking some things on, like you would in a bedroom.
Of course.
It's high tech, but it's flawless and it's seamless. Yeah.
It's really astounding what you can get from printers these days.
Oh my gosh.
I remember the first time, right after one of those Mars rovers landed, and they started outputting all this phenomenal high-resolution image of Mars. I went over to HP and I said, print me out one of these. And I had this massive wall wrap of just a shot of Mars. I had it behind my desk for years because it's amazing the quality you can get these days.
Yes, and it's so hard for us. We get excited even on the design team. They're like, what theme are we going to do this time? Because we have like an underwater theme, we have a woodland theme, and we have Cole's drawings. And so, yes, in terms of having them as a really good partner, it's been awesome. And it's fun to see what's going to be next in terms of themed out rooms.
I love hearing about technology being used for the good as well.
Tech for good. Yes.
Tech for good. You heard it here first. And so where can people find out more about the foundation?
Yes, so you can head on over to batcole.foundation. And it's big around holidays especially. You know, as I've noted, our big focus is on clinical trials. And clinical trials, it's a story into itself. It's what kept Cole alive 5 extra years and very happy. You have to be aggressive as a family, as I've learned in my experience as a volunteer, to find those clinical trials and what's out there. So we support that. But also, you know, holidays are a tough time for the kids. So head on over to batcole.foundation, learn more about Cole and also about what we're doing. So
if you're sitting around there, around your TV or your computer watching this and you're worried about, you know, Facebook and the horrible things that they're doing to you in social media, there is technology for good out there.
Tech for good.
We just have to go out there and support it.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. It's great
It's
talking
awesome.
to you.
It's a pleasure to be able to chat about this.
Greg, back to you. Let's get a little more of the headlines out there. Tell me what else is going on in the world of technology.
All right, will do. Thank you, Jeremy and Katie, Batcole Foundation. What a great organization and doing some great work. So thank you very much for hopping on the show today to talk about that. And again, we are live, so we're back here in the Portland, Oregon studio right now, taking your comments and your questions as they come through. I'm seeing one here from Kevin. Katie is awesome, definitely knows her stuff. Absolutely, I would 100% agree on that. So very exciting. But this next segment here that we're going to be discussing, we're going to be having Luke Dormel, one of our staff writers here from Digital Trends, hopping on the show. Now, if you follow a lot of our emerging tech stories on Digital Trends, then you probably have read some of Luke's articles. Luke talks a lot about robots and AI and a lot of that future tech that we kind of see when, you know, when we start looking at like Black Mirror episodes. Black Mirror, a lot of that seems to be more and more coming to reality. And if you're a fan of tech, you've probably watched Black Mirror. If you haven't, I highly recommend it, although it may disturb you in some of the aspects. Well, one of the things that is kind of a theme is what happens, how we use technology, especially, well, after we die. What happens with all of this information that we're putting out there? And there's a company right now called Replica AI that is working on something with that, where essentially the theory, I believe, is that you would put your personality up online so that it would exist as a chatbot after you die. But we need to get more in depth with that, and we have just the person to do that who is joining us. I believe we're ready to hop online right now with him. We've got Luke. Hello, Luke.
Hello, hi, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for hopping on today. So just talking about your article, and again, for everybody, it's at digitaltrends.com. You can take a look at it right there. And I posted about this on Twitter yesterday, and I have not had quite this response, quite as big a response as I have off of this particular question. And the question was just, would you want to upload be uploaded as a chatbot so that people could talk to you after you die, which is essentially what you're getting at with this article. But why don't we start with the beginning? Let's talk about what it is that you wrote about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this work, I basically, sorry, there was a paper that was published quite recently which came out of a university in India. And what they were interested in doing was taking this technology, which is called Replica AI, which I think was developed a couple of years ago by researchers in Russia. And the idea is essentially that it's a chatbot, so it's something that you communicate with by typing. It's a little bit kind of like sort of Siri or Google Now or any of these sort of chatbots that we're used to interacting with, except that it can't actually answer any useful questions. What it does is, as you interact with it, it gradually over time sort of learns your syntax and kind of the way that you speak. And the idea is that it can kind of sort of become a replica of yourself. So essentially, after a while, it's a little bit like speaking to a clone. So it's a sort of, I suppose, a narcissist's version of Siri, if you want to like that. But the idea was that was kind of expressed in this article was, what if you could go further than that, and rather than it being maybe the replica of a living person, that you were actually able to feed into it sort of information from some maybe people who are no longer around. So you could take social media posts, you could take kind of the wealth of writing that someone had produced during their life in all different forms, and then you could essentially use it to sort of be, I suppose, a surrogate version of someone who was no longer around. And that sounded kind of a completely wacky but interesting, sort of very Black Mirror-esque, as he said, idea. And what kind of interested me about it was that the more I looked into this, the more I realized that this wasn't the first time that had been mentioned. This is actually something that technologists have been interested in for quite a while. There's a long history of this idea. There are some great, well, I say great startups, some interesting sounding startups. There was a fantastic one a few years ago which tried to come up with a way that you could carry on tweeting after you had died. And it had a brilliant tagline, which was, I think, when your heart stops beating, you'll keep tweeting. That sadly is no longer around, but it was just interesting that this is an idea which very much seems to be kind of, I suppose, a number of people are kind of fascinated by this idea. And so until we get to the point where maybe we're able to kind of upload our brains or our consciousness onto a computer and kind of carry on living for real, there could be ways that AI could allow us to kind of continue communicating with people once they're no longer physically around.
I think there's several things with that you're talking about. I mean, one, I guess, I think it's fascinating that we're always trying to figure out when's AI going to be, reach singularity. When are we going to be able to talk to AI? When does AI get consciousness? And we think about AI as this foreign thing, but really we are the ones feeding it. And so then you go into this idea of, well, why can't I be an AI and live forever? That whole concept of I guess, living forever. One of those things that humanity's probably talked about for a long time was what happens after we die. Well, maybe we can still go on as that. I don't know, with the original question that I posted, I don't know if I want that, if I want myself to go on as a chatbot or not. But one of the other aspects that you were talking about is being able to talk to people from the past. I do like that idea, because I think even in there you reference talking to maybe a relative, what was World War I like? But then you would have their consciousness in there. You could ask them questions and get somewhat of a similar response, and maybe make more of a connection than we can now through pictures and everything else, because we do have so much information that's uploaded there online.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an extent to which, if you read a book that was written by a novelist who's no longer around, we kind of get a glimpse into the way that their mind worked. And of course, so that's not exactly the same, but kind of philosophically, it's the same idea in that, you can read, I have diaries which belonged to sort of great-great-grandparents, and it's fascinating to kind of read those. So really, you could think of something like this as an interactive version of that, where you could kind of go back and, rather than just reading the response, the things that they had kind of generated during their lifetime, it could be kind of imbued with all of someone's memories. And so it would sort of be an interactive way of maybe kind of looking up details about their lives. And certainly there are some interesting projects which have been done in that vein. There's a fascinating robotics project called Bina 48, which has been sort of in the news now, I guess, for about 8 years. And the idea there is of building a robot, and it's modeled on the wife of the person who's building it, and over the lifetime of this robot, they're essentially just trying to sort of ask their wife questions and sort of upload their consciousness to some degree to a machine as some sort of permanent record of them. And so I think that maybe as a historical idea, this could, as you say, be kind of interesting. It would be fascinating to be able to have a sort of an interactive archive, maybe, of family members who are no longer around. And in that sense, I don't see that it's substantially different from reading someone's diaries and getting a glimpse into their mind that way. But I think where it maybe becomes more problematic is the idea of maybe having it as a sort of bereavement tool. For example, saying, if someone's parents have died, for example, you couldn't then just give them a chatbot and say, oh, well, this is the same thing. I think that is getting into far more disturbing and sort of maybe problematic territory, because then that sort of, I suppose kind of affecting the bereavement process. And so I'm always sort of very dubious when a number of companies and people who are interested in this have kind of raised that as a potential sort of therapeutic use case. I don't think that is something which is technologically possible, and I don't think even if it was possible, it would be desirable. But as a historical sort of archive of someone, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think just even from a psychology standpoint, that's probably not a good idea to to grieve that way. Not that I know for sure, but again, referencing back to some of the Black Mirror episodes where we kind of see these things tested in fiction. I mean, some of this is pretty interesting how it's becoming a reality. I'm looking at a couple of comments here coming through. Edward just said, just another reason every few months I go back and delete postings. When I'm gone, let me go. So just as far as not taking those posts. But that is another interesting aspect when it does come to the social media side of this, because we are posting all of this up there. I mean, all this information is there. It's there in theory forever. So what would keep someone from just gathering that all on somebody else and creating some kind of a chatbot based on someone else's postings?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always think it's a weird sort of thought experiment to think that even something as simple as the recommender system on Amazon, you know, it's actually pretty astute when it comes to recommending me things that I'll be interested in.
Yeah.
So the idea that if I passed away tomorrow, it would still be recommending me books and things that would have been written after I died. I always think that's kind of a weird, weird thought. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of fascinating. And I think that one thing, sort of speaking to that last user comment that you had that's really interesting, is that a number of companies now, because things like social media are so new and they tend to be kind of maybe used predominantly by younger people, this idea of kind of what happened, of our sort of digital afterlife to an extent, hasn't really been, there have been a few kind of cases where this has kind of been broached, but it's not really something which is in the mainstream consciousness yet. But already we're starting to see, for example, kind of Google and Facebook, I think both have programs where they've sort of said to people, you know, you want to be aware of what's going to happen to this data after you're gone. You know, do you want to make sure that you've got family members who, for example, have your sort of password so that they can go and read this kind of wealth of information that you've generated during your life, or perhaps if you delete your posts regularly that you haven't sort of generated. But it's kind of a fascinating area. You know, what is going to happen to all of this information after we're gone? And, you know, do we maybe want to have sort of provisions where we suddenly say to people, well, actually, I would rather not be a chatbot after I've gone. So it's fascinating because so much of this is just like stuff from an episode of Black Mirror or some other sort of science fiction. But actually, it is very, very rapidly becoming a reality.
And these are decisions we're going to have to make. Like you said, maybe we're going to have to put in a provision from now on of, you know, I want all of my social media deleted after I pass away, or, you know, none of it can be used for something else. That's probably something, you know, we're going to have to start thinking about sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for hopping on here today, because this is, you know, all of your articles here are, I find them very fascinating. And these are things, you know, like I said, that we need to start thinking about how we handle this stuff. Did Replica say anything about what their next step is? You know, they've created this. You said it's been around for a couple of years. Are they actually going to go forward with this? Or what's the plan? Or do you just go on there and chat and see what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I should point out that the work that I discuss in the article is not official work being done by Replica. What Replica did, they created this chatbot originally, and then I think earlier this year they open sourced it, which is why you're now saying it used in research projects, which is what I discussed in this particular piece. But it's a really interesting app. But for anyone who's watching this who wants to go and download it, it's really kind of fun to play around on. And again, a little bit like that Amazon recommender system, which you suddenly find actually is, you know, knows you remarkably well. It's quite eerie how quickly it manages to pick up on certain sort of tics that you kind of, you know, sort of tics that you sort of use when you speak on a regular basis. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating to check out.
Maybe good for some corrective ideas too, if you're using too many of the same words, or just to correct some things that you're doing, being like, oh, I type that a lot. I use too many exclamation points. Yeah. Sure. So all of that, though, you can take a look at and check that out, digitaltrends.com. Take a look at Luke Dormel's articles. And Luke, thank you so much for hopping on to talk about this. Really, really fun subject.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Luke. All right, well, coming up here in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by another guest here at Digital Trends. Again, Digital Trends live every day, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you tech headlines, interesting discussions, fun to talk about this stuff. It really, really is Really fun stuff. And in just a minute, we're going to be joined by Justin Ching from J School. And J School has a really, really cool concept. Their whole idea is that they're a production company for movies, films, documentaries, television shows. And their mission is to empower underrepresented communities to tell their own stories in their own voices. I think one of the really great things that I saw that they had posted was just that it feels like there's people that always say, Hollywood's run out of ideas. Well, everybody's just repeating the same thing or remaking things. Well, there are a lot of ideas out there, and a lot of those ideas aren't getting made, and that's part of what Justin is actually talking about and trying to rectify. So we're going to be having Justin on here in just a couple of minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break while we get things lined up, and then we'll be back here in just a minute, live, taking your comments, your questions again. Drop in there, let us know what you want to talk about, and back here in just a minute after a quick break with Justin, here on Digital Trends Live. Back here with more Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler, and I'm very excited to be joined by our next guest. What he's doing, I think the company has an amazing mission, but I want him to explain it himself. So why don't we go ahead and bring him on right now. It is Justin Ching from J School. Hello, Justin.
Hey, Greg, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me on the show.
Doing great. Yeah, thanks so much for hopping in here. We were talking about the school here just a little bit ago on the show, but I figured maybe since you're on here, why don't we have you walk us through what it is that J School does, what your mission is.
First of all, I like how you call it the school. I don't think I've heard anyone call it shorthand yet, so I'm going to steal that.
Okay, good.
So J School's mission is to empower underrepresented communities to tell their story in their own voices. We're a production company that's really focused on marginalized groups, i.e. people of color, women, the LGBT plus community, and frankly, a lot of others that I don't think we always talk about. But, my goal is to help the voices out there that are not being told and to give them the ability to have a first person narrative. I think a lot of times when we talk about storytelling, we have a lot of great people on camera, and certainly we're in this period where there's sort of unprecedented diversity on camera, but behind the camera, the leadership in terms of the directors, the writers, the producers are not always reflective of the identity of the people on camera. So my mission and the mission of J School is to make those more aligned.
I think that's a great idea because that is something that probably does get overlooked quite a bit in that, you're right, on camera, that's really easy to see. We can see the diversity there, but yeah, the behind the scenes, how many people follow along with that and actually have, an idea of what's going on that side of it. So for you, where did you get your start in all of this?
Yeah, look, for me, I kind of came from a remarkably unremarkable place. So I was born and raised in San Bernardino, which is most people only know now, unfortunately, because of the mass shooting a couple of years ago. But I think that actually is very symptomatic of the way that place is. So it's a place where, you're surrounded by mostly Black and Latino folks in my specific community, and then around that are sort of self-proclaimed, redneck white folk. And again, I use that not flippantly. It's self-proclaimed.
Right. Yeah.
They would describe themselves. NASCAR is one of the biggest industries we have out there, and next to that are literal rock quarries, strawberry fields, and a lot of Amazon shipment centers. Most people, it's the last big freight truck stop on the way to Los Angeles,
Okay.
and that's predominantly our traffic. And so when you think about that place, it made me very much, on one hand, value movies and television as my window to the world. Not to date myself here, but I didn't really have social media growing up. So the way that I learned about the world and the way that I learned about myself thereby was through movies and television. And that was very much the way that I sort of found writing and creativity as my outlet.
I think I was going to ask, how do you go from being in that environment? Doesn't sound like it's, necessarily a creative environment for getting into film. So I think that's interesting about how you looked at it from that side. You didn't go into NASCAR.
Yeah.
So you get into
cars, and I know you guys have a car show, which I think is fantastic.
We do, yeah. I mean, cars are great, but I think this is a really interesting story of how you went through this process and became this. So you become interested in films and you're learning about the world through that. That's one aspect, but how do you start making films, or even, going about this process to where you're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I very much valued writing as my only sort of creative outlet, and the way that I expressed myself growing up, going through some tough times. And I think that for me, I never really saw filmmaking as this career path. It was this very, very foreign thing. Like, San Bernardino is only maybe an hour and a half outside of LA, but emotionally very distant, or it's symbolically very distant. We don't have even local TV channels. We pipe in everything either from the desert or from Los Angeles. But if you're coming from a place where truck stops are one of your big industries, and they're showing you Hollywood premieres on ABC7, you're like, well, there's a huge disconnect there, right? Like, it might as well be France. And so I never really saw that as a direct pathway professionally, but personally, I was writing a lot, and I was using that as my only outlet. And then when I was 17, the two most important things in my life happened. I got into a really great college, University of Pennsylvania. Shout out to all the Quakers out there. That changed my life in terms of opening up my worldview and understanding that there was the option for storytelling to be a career path. And then on the other hand, personally, I unfortunately suffered this tragedy. I lost a friend to suicide. And that experience, going into college was sort of this shattering to then have to rebuild from that and sort of reprioritize the things in life, but also understand that now that I was in this new world in college where there was all this opportunity, that maybe there was an opportunity to take the storytelling that was my only really coping mechanism, the writing that was my only coping mechanism, and combine that with these professional aspirations. And that's very much a lot of the way I arrived today. And there are some great people I met along the way who I'm still in touch with, who gave me my first opportunities. I'm so grateful that they saw something in me.
I think that's so cool, that you took those different experiences and turned that into your motivation to get to this point. And now you have J School. How do you reach out to other people? Your goal is to help these underrepresented communities who may not even realize there's an opportunity there, to do this kind of work, maybe are interested, but I just don't even know where to begin. Whoever it is, how do you reach out to them?
Yeah, a lot of it, as you kind of mentioned, is not as obvious, because to the masses, right, you watch a movie and you see a lot of diverse faces and you think to yourself, okay, that's all happening within this container. You have no idea what's happening in the back end world. I had no idea when I was growing up watching Spielberg. I'm like, I have no idea how that's made. Yep. The numbers right now, and hopefully in the next year or so they'll improve, but the Directors Guild of America, the DGA, just released their diversity numbers, and it's at an all-time low, despite the fact that the content out there seems to be more diverse. So a lot of what I do, I think, is, first of all, raise my hand and say, look, like, I'm here for you. And a lot of the projects I work on, it's not about me being the director or the writer and like getting my hands on the creative and molding it in my image, right? It's molding it in their image and just saying, hey, for this one, I just want to be your sponsor, right? I want to be a producer who's going to be the person who helps you secure financing, to help mentor you on things that you may not know yet. But this is your show. This is your movie. And I think it takes a certain distinction, I think, a certain just like mental shift to say, hey, this isn't really all about me. This is about someone else. And so a lot of the way that people have reached out to me, frankly, has just been cold. Like they will just email me or hit me up on LinkedIn or social media, and I'll take a look at their work and I'll ask them, I'll say like, how did you find me? Like what is it about me that seems to be something you want to work with? And I'm working on a project with these two young guys right now, and they're two young gay men who have the story about sort of the intercultural clash between them being sort of these young gay yuppies and then going into like a community where they're potentially gentrifying it and being sort of aware that they're doing that. And they said, like, if you're a young man of color who's gay, there are only a handful of people you can really reach out to, most of whom are famous, right? Way bigger than I am. Barry Jenkins, the director of Moonlight, and others, right?
Right.
And then there are people who seem to be like willing to work with others and be accessible. And they said that, I was one of those guys, and I was really touched by that. But I also use that as sort of a point of validation where I said, hey, like, there are people out there who are just dying to tell these stories and dying to talk to someone who will give them the time of day to even just say, hey, this is good. Maybe this is not so good, but at least give them the opportunity.
Right. Because, I mean, a lot of times you don't know what needs to happen to tell a story, but somebody to listen is important. I think, kind of just to go back to a car reference, it sounds like, you're providing the vehicle, but they're the driver. It's their path, but you're helping them get to a point where they can go on down that path.
The challenge is to not be a backseat driver, which I think is a tough part of the industry.
Yeah, right. Not have them, not try to direct them in the wrong way. Let's talk about some of your projects that you have right now. What can people go check out that's completed?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a portfolio work, you can always look at my website. So our website is j-school.co. So not .com, but .co.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of completed works. Stuff that we have coming up, probably the thing I'm most passionate about talking about is there's a documentary short called Esfuerzo, which is Spanish for effort, about Mexican migrant workers in the wine industry. And I think it is this amazing clash of cultures, as well as this epitome, I think, of the immigration debate, where you have these Mexican-American migrant workers, many of whom are undocumented, working and servicing this very luxury industry, where the beneficiaries of the industry tend to be very conservative and, frankly, are the kinds of people who would want to put those workers on the other side of a wall. And I think that that's a very fascinating, dramatic telling of the role that these people play in terms of not just agriculture, but the fabric of our larger, society. It's right now just a documentary short. It went to Napa and a couple other festivals, and we were very, very proud of that. The director, Elena, had reached out to me to talk about the project, and now her and I are going through the process of developing it into a feature documentary. And that's very much, our focus now is trying to meet more families out there who have had this experience, also identify more filmmakers who can join our team, who can, again, speak to this in a first-person way, in a way that I really can't, right? I grew up with a lot of migrant workers because of my hometown, but that wasn't my experience, and so I don't want to try to, like, co-opt that. I want to just, again, sponsor it and do what I can to make sure the project gets made. Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting story to tell that that a lot of people haven't thought about. The migrant workers in the wine industry. I mean, that's a really, really interesting topic.
Yeah, we tend to think about it like citrus or corn. The way we talk about migrant workers, and we sort of label it as sort of unskilled labor. I mean, anyone who's ever worked on a farm or spoken worked on a farm, that it is a labor of love and it's really a craft. And with wine, you're talking about something where it's all craft, right?
Right.
Like the year that it's made, the weather pattern, the plot of land that it's planted on all determine the premium value of this product. And a lot of these winemakers are in this real conundrum because they are sort of in the camp politically where they would want to have stronger immigration regulation, build a wall, export a ton of people. But they would know if they would do that, they would serve against their own best interests because the luxury wine industry would collapse without these workers because they would have to go 5 years without a foreman or without a lead farmer who actually knows how to plant the grapes. And so they're stuck in this really interesting paradox that I think really punctuates the immigration debate.
Well, and it is. It's actually really interesting, and it's I want to direct people to the right place to go too. So it's j-school.co, where people can go and check that out. And is that a good place too to reach out if somebody wants to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can reach out over there, or you can reach out on my social media across all platforms. It's Justin R. Ching. That's Ching.
Fantastic. Well, Justin, thank you so much for hopping on, to talk about your work. Really interesting stuff, and best of luck as you continue forward with this. And I'm excited to see the stories that come out of J-School.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Justin. All right, and thanks everybody for tuning in to Digital Trends Live. Again, we really appreciate it. Live every day, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you all kinds of stories and all kinds of tech news and a lot of different aspects of a lot of different things that maybe you didn't know about. We'd like to learn something here on this show as well. We started off the show with Marie on here, just talking about everything going on in the tech headlines, in particular that Samsung 5G story, which we always talk about. We had Katie Linendoll on to talk about Batcoal and the really cool things they are doing with VR for people who are suffering from pediatric cancer and how they can help them out. We had Luke Dormel on to talk about whether or not you want to have your personality uploaded as a chatbot for the future, where that's going to go, talking about some Black Mirror kinds of things. And then, of course, Justin Ching talking about J-School and some of the great work that they are doing. Every day we're live here. Taking a look tomorrow on the docket, we're going to be talking about some 3D printing here with Digital Trends Live at 9 a.m. Pacific. We've got a Qualcomm event recap, probably talking some more about 5G or whatever they're going to be bringing up. We've got Liz Dunn who's hopping on, so something new every day. Hit that subscribe button to make sure you get the notification when we go live, and be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for another episode of Digital Trends Live. Thanks, everybody.